Welcome, one and all, to another episode of The Damage Report with me, John DeRola, and on this Tuesday edition of the show, a very special guest joining us, I believe for the second time only, acting executive director for Gen Z for Change, Elise Joshi. Welcome back to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me again.
Glad to have you here. Thank you for taking time out. It's common practice that a lot of our co-hosts tend to be busy, but you just started classes up again, right?
Yes, last semester at Cal, so also last semester doing full-time work and full-time school. Thank
That
goodness.
seems like a lot. That's awesome. I like into maybe junior year or so of when I was in college, back in dinosaur times, I would listen to the Young Turks. They were not inviting me on though. So anyway, I'm sort of after the fact jealous of you, but very happy to be having you on our program. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Excited.
We're going to be talking about some of the recent or upcoming actions for Gen Z for Change in just a little bit. So everyone stay tuned for that. But also a lot of big stories that we're going to be talking about through the course of this hour. George Santos apparently feeling a little bit of the pressure because he's decided that he's not even going to pretend to do some parts of his job as a congressman. So that's going to be fun. We've got some updates on the right-wing attempt to spin the tragic killing of Tyre Nichols, going along paths we've seen them tread before. We'll be evaluating Elon Musk's apology for spreading homophobic conspiracy theories in the wake of the attempted assassination of Nancy and Paul Pelosi. And is COVID over? There's a bipartisan effort to declare it and to get credit for it. We'll be giving you our thoughts. And if you stick around for the full show in the aftermath, Florida schools want to know more about the periods of students in high school. That's fun. And Chicken-geddon. Is the sky falling when it comes to foul? We will be evaluating the evidence there. But before that, please hit the like button, share the stream so that people know we're live. And if you want to reach out to Elise or myself with questions, comments, concerns, and all that, you can send us comments, tweets, and super chats, and we'll respond as we go. But with all that said, Elise, are you ready to start the show?
So ready.
Okay. Well, in that case, let's jump into it.
Doesn't it further wear down credibility when you put someone who's under state, local, federal, and international investigation as a representative of your party on committees? I'm talking about George Santos, representative from New York.
We should have that discussion. So let's have that discussion. You want to bring up Santos, and let's talk about the institution itself, because I agree wholeheartedly that Congress is broken.
That's interesting that you use the word agree there, Kevin McCarthy, because she hadn't been saying that. She was actually talking about something else, and you seem to understand that because you said you want to have a conversation about George Santos. Then you immediately pivoted to something that was very much not George Santos. But maybe I'm being unfair. After all, maybe eventually he's going to get to it, and he's going to address the questions that just won't go away. Well, let's take a look at how the rest of the interview went.
I think your listeners or viewers should understand what proxy voting was, because it never took place in Congress
But I'm asking
before.
you about George Santos.
I know you asked me a question. Let me ask you.
Because you could put it to a vote.
You asked me a question. I'd appreciate if you let me answer. So let's go through this, because it's not one simple answer.
If you got a third of your caucus to vote to oust him, you could do so. You don't think you could get your Republicans to do that?
I wasn't finished answering the question.
So you're just not going to answer the question I asked?
Well, no, you don't get to question whether I answer it. You asked a question. I'm trying to get you through that.
I don't think you've said the name George Santos like once.
But you know what?
You're talking about proxy voting and other things.
But you started the question with Congress was broken, and I agreed with you.
No, they're wrapping me in the control room because we're going to
that's unfortunate. I wish I could answer the question.
Leave it there.
Yeah, he sure thinks it's unfortunate that, he just didn't get around to answering the question. Or as he said when she rightly interrupted him, when he said, you haven't let me finish answering the question. Boy, you didn't start answering the question. And his little defense where he's like, yeah, well, but when you first said it, you said the word Congress. Okay, technically, but I think we all know what question she was answering. You can't be like, well, I'm just going to talk about the decorations of the room because you asked the question in the room. So technically you freed me up to talk about whatever I want. No, it is very clear. One, that he does not want to have to talk about George Santos, obviously, and I sort of understand that. And two, that he's not as clever as he thinks he is and not as good at sort of weaseling around the questions. That was embarrassing. It is obvious what he thinks, how unsure he is that the Republicans either should or would actually boot George Santos from the party or from Congress to whatever extent they have that ability. And so I don't, Elise, I just think it's hilarious that this is from my point of view, a layup. The guy's an insane liar. You can show yourselves to be even sort of like fake honest by at least distancing yourself from him, but they won't even do that.
No, it just is the epitome of what he is right now, and he's the leader supposedly, but I think it's clear with this and everything else that he's just not somebody who has much power or control. He doesn't really dictate what happens. He's really just a guy that is taking orders from other people, and he will mosey around answers because he really doesn't have much power. He sacrificed everything he believes in to have the title he has now, and and now we're just seeing the effects of that.
Yeah, and we know that there are some in the Republican Party that feel like we might say for him that okay, so he's not really condemning George Santos, and he's certainly not trying to kick him out of the party, but at least he's not like really speaking out in defense of him, although he did say that he was elected by the constituents, which is technically true, but he knows how dishonest that is. And then you have people like Marjorie Greene that are just open boosters of George Santos. And the thing is, Marjorie Greene technically is not the Speaker of House. Technically, George Santos is. But if it came down to choosing between Kevin McCarthy and Marjorie Greene, where do we think the Republican base would go? Who do you think that they feel like a more warmth towards, Elise?
Well, I think Marjorie Taylor Greene has a lot more say in the House now than she did last year because of a majority, but also because she has a lot of control with Kevin McCarthy now. But I also think that she's just down for whatever is going to create the most ruckus. I mean, she's not really for the American people or any policy in particular. She's just for blowing things up. And she'll be pro George Santos because he's drama and she loves drama.
Yeah, and I'm sure, he needs allies. I'm sure she would like some allies. I don't know how powerful of one he is. Although each of his different personas might have a little bit of power, and when you add them together, then maybe that's something. I don't know. But that's just, if you're going to give a performance like that, my advice to Kevin McCarthy would be just don't go on the news. Like, honestly, if you can't come up with, like, he had almost a defense when he's like, who are you talking about? Eric Swalwell or whatever. Like, no, obviously that's not who she's talking about. But at least then you can talk about, like, well, he's made all of these horrendous objective lies about the Holocaust and his mom dying and all that. And then you have Eric Swalwell, where we have a conspiracy theory about a Chinese spy or something. You could try to create a little bit of ambiguity there. But he couldn't stick to it. He started talking about proxy voting, and nobody's asking about that. Nobody cares about that. You're not convincing anyone.
You'd think a career politician would be better at spinning, but no.
Yeah, that's one of the main skills that they're supposed to have. But in any event, we do have some relatively breaking news when it comes to this. Maybe Kevin McCarthy putting some pressure on George Santos in the background. We don't know yet, but here's what we do know. Representative George Santos apparently told the House GOP conference on Tuesday behind closed doors that he wants off the two committees that he's currently on until his issues are resolved. And I think what he means by that is people stop asking him questions. I'm assuming at this point that his issues will never truly be resolved. They seem baked quite deep into him. But anyway, as of right now, he's serving on the small business and the science committees, and he apparently doesn't want to do that for now. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia told CNN that it was Santos's decision that he made on his own to abstain from the committees. I've literally never heard of anyone doing this before, but she said he told the conference he would step aside from the committees as the GOP is trying to oust Democratic Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota from the Foreign Affairs Committee. She said specifically, he just felt like there was so much drama really over the situation, and especially what we're doing to remove Ilhan Omar from the Foreign Affairs Committee. But Mr. Santos' statement in there was just saying that he spoke with Speaker McCarthy and made this decision on his own. So I think tying this, for whatever reason, to their ridiculous xenophobic, Islamophobic attempt to get Ilhan Omar off of her committee is weird. They really do want to stress that this was his decision and not Kevin McCarthy's, which that actually makes me like maybe think that Kevin McCarthy did push for it. Why are they being so explicit about that? One would think a decision that a congressman announces was his decision. It seems defensive, like it's like they don't want the MAGA people to know that Kevin McCarthy was pushing for one of the big liars in their party off. I don't know. I'm a little bit confused, Elise, but what do you think?
I mean, don't you know George Santos is against the drama? He wants to back away from it all. Of course, he wants to just avoid anything. That I honestly couldn't tell you, but this is the first I'm hearing about it. But I think you're right. It is just a way to distance Kevin McCarthy from any decision making, which is it just seems like something he wouldn't necessarily want. I don't think he likes that he's being perceived as this spineless figure, but more and more decisions that are coming out of the House don't seem to associate with him. And this is just another example.
Yeah. There's a lot that I am fully willing to admit that I don't understand about this and that I'm not sure about. But if I can say definitively, I do not buy that he doesn't like drama. Come on, this guy. Didn't he, when like his boyfriend was going to leave him, he was like, oh, I bought us tickets for a big vacation down to South America. And it was totally made up. He didn't have the tickets or whatever. Like, come on. Then he stole the guy's phone. You love the drama. And that's fine. Lots of people do. That might be the most endearing thing about George Santos. But no, I think, look, if anything, this is Kevin McCarthy wanting to not have another interview like he had with Margaret Brennan, which I understand. It was brutal. Him wanting to recede from the spotlight a little bit, thinking maybe that gets people to move on and forget about me. Or number three, the dude doesn't really want to work. He doesn't want to work on like marking up legislation and coming up with amendments and late night vote-a-ramas and all that. He wants like the benefits and he wants the cred without the work. So I don't know. I think he might just be using this as an opportunity to get out of some homework.
Yeah, no, I agree. He's a drama politician. He's an attention-grabbing person, and this is another headline that he gets to make, and it has nothing to do with policy again. So,
yeah,
whether it's Kevin McCarthy or George Santos or some combination of the two.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right that, look, I think he's pretty much down for whatever headline, but some of the headlines that might be coming up, some of the news might not be as good for him going forward. Why don't we transition into that? You can add to the list of multiple investigations, both here in the United States and in Brazil, that are already ongoing, targeting Representative George Santos, if that's his real name. Well, now we have a new one. The DOJ has reportedly opened a criminal investigation into George Santos's campaign finances. This is not the only investigation that's currently looking into his campaign finances. But I think it's a good thing to investigate, because while he has done many reprehensible, unethical things, the clearest example that it appears we have when it comes to illegal acts is in his campaign finance. Aside from the fraud case in Brazil, he did appear to have done that. We'll see if Brazil ever gets justice. For now, though, there's a lot of questions about some of what he has claimed happened when it came to his campaign finance, and we want to give the details. So they say, in a sign that federal prosecutors are investigating Representative George Santos' campaign finances, the DOJ has reportedly asked the FEC to hold off on any enforcement actions against the freshman member of Congress, who's become notorious for, literally everything. Earlier this month, the campaign watchdog group Campaign Legal Center asked the FEC to investigate the $705,000 that Santos said he loaned to his campaign. Considering he declared an income of just $55,000 back in 2020, the group wants the FEC to find out how he could have done so with his own funds. So they were going to investigate it. It appears now that the DOJ is asking them to stop because they don't want dueling investigations, perhaps. That's no guarantee that they're actually going to find anything, or if they do, that there will be consequences, or if there are, that those consequences will be significant. But it is a really interesting question as to where the hell that money came from. I don't know if maybe he just got lucky and found some original vintage packs of Pokemon cards, or maybe he bought a couple of Bored Apes and they went to the moon. But other than that, I don't know how you put together $700,000 in just a couple of years. But what do you think?
I honestly have no notes other than this doesn't surprise me. It's just one thing after another with him. And I have no idea how he would come up with that money, but his alternative life in Brazil might explain it, that we just don't know about.
True, maybe George Santos only had $55,000, but maybe Anthony DeVolder's just rolling in money. I don't know. But here's an interesting added wrinkle and some good work being done here by Mother Jones. They tried to call his top donors, and many don't seem to exist. Uh-oh. So under federal campaign finance law, it's illegal to donate money using a false name or the name of someone else. Now, bear in mind, in this case, it's other people who are being alleged to have used fake names, not George Santos, who also commonly uses fake names. So these questionable donations that they're looking into account for more than $30,000 of the $338,000 that his campaign raised from individual donors in 2020. It hasn't previously been looked into. And they've talked to dozens of the most generous donors, but they didn't. This is the campaign back in 2020, by the way. So bear in mind, as we go forward with the investigations, there's multiple years and multiple countries worth of potential illegal acts. But in any event, where that money came from, who actually gave it, is it maybe just somebody not wanting the disclosure, so they use a fake name? Is there a good reason that they wanted to hide the source of the money? I don't know. But as of right now, we're obviously pretty sick of him. Turns out the people of his district are super sick of him. Overwhelming bipartisan support for his resignation inside of his congressional district. And these numbers are just insane, Elise. 78% of voters believe he should step down. That includes 71% of Republicans and 89% of Democrats. Now, I mean, one could make the point that maybe 71% isn't enough. The dude lied about his mom dying in the towers, and he lied about the Holocaust. How does 29% of your district Republicans still think, it's a mixed bag, or I don't have strong feelings? How do you not have strong feelings at this point? But I don't know if we've ever seen numbers this high in a bipartisan fashion, Elise, for people to step down. So that's something.
Oh yeah, it's incredible. And I would hope that if Kevin McCarthy doesn't want to oust him, that people do when the election comes around. But it's really disappointing when there is such bipartisan support that Republicans won't really do the right thing. But we know that bipartisan support doesn't really imply anything about a Republican Congress member's stance on anything. So still not a surprise.
That's true. Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily imply anything about what Kevin McCarthy would actually do. It might be that in the end, we just have to wait for him to either be destroyed in a Republican, more likely destroyed in a Republican primary in 2024. I don't think he'd get to the general election. And that can be okay. Like, when Madison Cawthorn gets elected and spends 2 years ignoring his constituents and punching dead trees or whatever, and then he gets ousted, that's good. And Lauren Boebert almost lost in her first re-election bid. But I don't know. For me, it's not enough. Like, I don't want him to have succeeded in getting even 2 years. Like, the idea, like, I can think of so many people, and I'm sure you can think of even more people who the country would be so enriched by them serving an elected office for a couple years. The idea that he would get to finish out his term and not be, like, ejected from, like, down the steps of the Capitol, it doesn't seem like enough considering the severity of his lies.
Exactly. And it really just highlights a pattern with GOP and Lauren Boebert, Madison Cawthorn, George Santos. It's all this radicalization of the right, and the fact that the establishment GOP don't seem to be doing anything to stop this radicalization implies some implicit or explicit support of it. And I worry that, George Santos having 2 more years, Lauren Boebert skating by, it furthers this narrative that the GOP are really, really starting to hone in on the furthest left, even though it seems like a small group. And yeah, it's very disappointing.
Yeah. Well, we're going to be watching. I'm sure there's already tons of Republicans in his district that are just waiting to run against him. So that'll be coming in, honestly, not that much longer. But for now, we're going to be moving on to other news. We have to take a short break, but don't go anywhere because there's a lot more after this.
But here are some of the facts that people aren't talking about. This all could have been avoided with one simple move. Tyre Nichols could have complied from the moment he was pulled out of that car. If you watch this interaction, he never really complies until the very end.
Obviously, we have heard that sort of argument made by that sort of guy on that sort of network many, many, many times in these sorts of attacks, and it has been very clear for a very long time how intentionally stupid of a thing that is to say that if only he'd complied, well then clearly that group of homicidal maniacs would have stopped beating him. That's not true. But even if you thought that maybe if he had somehow complied more than he already was, I mean, he was laid out on the ground. I don't know how much less of a threatening posture you could make. You would probably be able to bear in mind information that was already 100% available by the time Grant Stinchfield decided to do that stupid monologue. Tyre Nichols was given 71 commands in 13 minutes, shouted at him by multiple different people, giving him mutually exclusive commands at a time when he was being tased and pepper sprayed and beaten and being told to, for instance, simultaneously raise his arms when his arms were being held. Move in multiple different ways at the same exact time. Being told one thing by one cop, and then another cop runs up to get involved in the murder and yells something else. So I would love to know if Grant Stinchfield had the genetic capability to operate in good faith for even 3 or 4 seconds, how the hell was he supposed to comply with all that? And if we could create sort of like a holodeck type situation, we were to throw Grant Stinchfield in it, I would love to see him try to figure out what sort of compliance could be deployed that would stop those people from beating the life out of Tyre Nichols. Elise, I'm so sick of hearing it. It's a racist man making a racist argument for a racist audience and not caring about how racist it is because he knows this is gonna increase his clout and money.
It's as simple as that. And there is no justification for murder, but let's be clear that this was a traffic stop, and a traffic stop should not warrant this many officers and this kind of escalation. But police are trained to do that, and police are trained to, and they're told that if they de-escalate, they're putting themselves in danger, and they react in this way. And first of all, cops should not be involved in traffic stops, but the fact that it had escalated in this way is in no way to do with Tyre Nichols' response. It's just simply a system that is designed to create this stream of events. And it's really disappointing that even when Memphis does get ahead of it and charge these police officers, that Fox News still won't admit that there was something wrong. And it's still the fault of the person who was just innocently stopped for a traffic issue.
No, 100%. I'm gonna just briefly summarize the rest of his argument because I don't want people to have to hear his voice anymore, and you should definitely not watch his show. But he's very proud about this monologue. By the way, this isn't like one of the things where Aaron Rupar or ASIN or something like that, or Media Matters have grabbed this video. No, he's tweeting this out because he's very proud of the points that he's making. He says the mainstream media doesn't care about Tyre Nichols. Instead, leftists are exploiting the case to divide the nation and wage war on all cops. Here are the facts. And he goes on to say that they don't actually care. Oh no, Grant Stinchfield cares. He definitely cares. His heart is broken for this murder, which is why he felt like he needed to go on social media on his TV show and talk about how people are being mean to the cops. In the wake of watching 5 individuals beat the life out of a person, can't dispute it in literally any way. That's what happened. You watched it. It was inhuman. It was barbaric. It was brutal. He feels like his job is to defend the cops. They're at like relatively reasonable Republicans in this case would be like, bad apples? He's not even doing bad apples. He's just out and out defending the cops. And at the end of the day, you don't care about Grant Stinchfield. I don't care about Grant Stinchfield. I had to check to make sure that I was pronouncing his last name right. I'm gonna forget his name in about 5 seconds. But there are so many right-wingers out there that are proving to us in the wake of that video coming out that there is no case bad enough, clear enough, videotaped enough that is going to get through to them, that is going to get them to see that this is a busted system that desperately needs reform to the extent that a system like this can be reformed or to be broken down in the way that Elise pointed out. Maybe cops shouldn't be doing sorts of things. Maybe they don't need to be involved in traffic stops. Maybe that's just worse for America. And so just bear that in mind going forward. Like we can see that and be devastated by it. We can use it as the stimulus to try to push for some sort of reform, but there are always going to be the Grant Stinchfields that see it and think, oh, that looks really bad for us, but war on the cops. And they're just gonna continue that narrative.
Yeah, but it's gonna get harder and harder for them to do that. And especially when it comes to videos like this, where every reform that has been tried has been highlighted in this video to have failed. And it becomes easier and easier as a progressive to highlight that there's something fundamentally flawed with police. You can diversify cops all you want. You can switch guns out for tasers. You can add money to train them harder. And this still happens. So maybe there's something very dramatic that we can do to prioritize community. And that's going to get more popular with Republicans and independents and Democrats.
Attorneys representing the family of Tyre Nichols are pointing out one of the recent updates in the investigation that seems more than a little bit suspicious, and it has to do with the only known as of this point white police officer that was involved in the killing of Tyre Nichols, seeming to get some special treatment. So Memphis Police Department has recently confirmed that Officer Preston Hemphill, who, if the name wasn't enough for you to know, is white, was relieved of duty and put on paid administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigation. So eventually he gets put on, he's relieved of duty or whatever. Not nearly as bad as what's happened with the other cops. But lawyers point out that Hemphill can be seen on body camera footage released by the Memphis PD last week. He's violently pulling Nichols from the car while hitting him on the ground with a taser, later saying, quote, "I hope they stomp his ass after he runs away." Well, in this case, Preston Hemphill got his wish, got the stomping that he wanted. Now he can live with that for the rest of his life. Imagine like knowing that you have a video camera broadcast, like recording on your chest saying, "I hope they beat the hell out of that person." And you get what you want. The lawyers have added, why is his identity and the role he played in the death just now coming to light? Because bear in mind, this investigation has been going on for some time. The other identities were revealed. They had been fired and eventually charged. Why was this one guy being shielded and protected from the public eye, they say? And a lot of people are speculating, and it's wild speculation, I know, that maybe the fact that he was the white individual in this case might have had something to do with that. Elise, what do you think about this case that the lawyers for the Nichols family are saying?
Is that too far-fetched of an idea? That, hey, we've seen this video, it's brutal, we got to get ahead of things. So let's charge the black officers involved, and we'll worry about this white guy later. And it just doesn't seem in this country, with responses in general to police brutality, that we're going to do the least that we possibly can for accountability. And just the note on his reaction and his commentary with the body camera, it really just highlights how police know how much power there is behind them, that they don't believe that they will ever be held accountable. They can say whatever they want, they can do whatever they want with video cameras, and they have this belief that nothing bad's gonna happen to them.
Yeah, they're confident. No, like think about the level of confidence that you would have to have. Again, like as we were talking about, because we've been talking about this now for several days. It's not just that all of them have cameras on their chest. I don't know what has to be happening to you psychologically and emotionally that you would do the things that they do, literally knowing that you have a camera in your chest. Have you ever heard? There's like one of the things that people say. It's like a cliche for how to live a good life or whatever. It's I had heard it growing up. It's like live like your dead grandma's watching you from heaven or whatever. Like live like your relatives are watching you, and only do the things that you'd be comfortable doing if you knew they were watching. Would that stop them at this point? Because you're on camera, you know that. How does that not stop you? But beyond that, they've been cops since 2017. People are saying most of them started around 2017. How many incredibly high profile national killings of unarmed people, the scandals related to that, have they been through as cops? They've seen news cycle after news cycle after news cycle. They've seen the George Floyd protests. They've seen endless cases like this. And then they go and chase that person and they just beat him to death. Nothing in the context, nothing in the accountability, nothing in the training, nothing was enough to get them to stop. I'm not even saying not to do it at all. Even mid-beating for them to stop. At some point for one of them to say, I think we got him. It's crazy how little has any effect at all, Elise.
Yeah, and it's less about don't you know the consequences and more, do you identify with the people in your community as police officers? Why did you become a cop? What was your goal? Was it to make your community safer? Because you'd think they wouldn't even have escalated to this situation, but in this situation, like, what am I doing right now? What have I become? I mean, I don't know how training police officers gets to the point of just separating them from their community, but also separating them from their humanity. Because these are real people, and police officers are real people, and somehow through training or through hanging around with their buddies all the time, they've convinced themselves that they're superior, that they're outside of accountability, that they aren't really members of the places that they live.
Yeah, obviously there is something fundamentally dehumanizing happening where they start to see those people as something else, something lesser, something that does not need to be protected, something that does not need to be served. Okay, we're gonna move on in just 1 second to other news. As a bit of a palate cleanser, I'm just gonna read a comment or two. I'd seen Caleb Winnie just popped into the comments. They just dropped in. Hi, John. Can't stay long, but I hit the like button. Thank you for your service. I appreciate that. I am Sock says, I hope they keep Santos around forever. It makes the Republicans look so bad at first at little cost. Well, but is it a little cost? I understand it's not the highest cost that we've paid, but it's not nothing. And by the way, don't worry, I am Sock. If we do get rid of George Santos, there are gonna be plenty of Republicans making them look bad. I'm not too worried about that. But anyway, I like the disagreement. Let's bring on more of it after all. And remember, there's gonna be a Blue Apron gift card being given away for good or funny or insightful comments. So send those at us. With that said, let's move on to a little story. In the wake of the vicious act of political violence against Nancy Pelosi and her husband, Paul, you know that there was a lot of conspiracy theorizing going around, jokes being made by right wingers about the attack. And Elon Musk over there, who used to be the richest man in the world, participated in that. Spreading homophobic conspiracy theories that this was not a right winger trying to assassinate the Speaker of the House. It was just a gay fling or something. It was a fun little conspiracy theory for them, and they really enjoyed it. Elon Musk, of course, is gonna jump in something like that, which is why I was pretty shocked when I saw that he apparently apologized for tweeting the baseless conspiracy theory about Paul Pelosi. You don't often see any right winger apologize for that sort of thing. And after the video came out of the Paul Pelosi attack, we have not seen much of that. I think Glenn Beck sort of apologized. So Elon Musk did it, and that is good news. Or at least it would be good news because I'm not actually buying it. Let's actually dive into the evidence that's informing all of these headlines of him apologizing for doing that stuff. First of all, if you didn't see, he responded to a tweet by Hillary Clinton back then saying, there's a tiny possibility there might be more to this story than meets the eye. And so he shared this article to the Santa Monica Observer, which attributes the attack to some sort of argument that went wrong, or Paul Pelosi knew him, or they were hooking up, or God knows what. Something that means we don't have to have a long-awaited reckoning on political violence in America. Santa Monica Observer, of course, has long been known for publishing fake news, just completely made up news about Hillary Clinton dying and her body double debating Donald Trump and all that. But why would the richest man in the world and a guy who owns one of the most important social media companies know anything about the sources that he's spreading? In any event, that was then, and this is now. So what is the apology? It appears to be this. Stephanie Ruhle had tweeted, this would be a perfect moment for Elon Musk to apologize to the Pelosi family. Elon Musk replied, I did. Okay, so first off, are we supposed to accept that he did? Because he said that he did? Well, he'd never lie. But let's say that you do accept it, that some conversation happened. The public facing thing, the accountability part is, I did. Not even with a period or anything. 2-word answer, he gives you 5 characters counting the space. Seems a little bit dismissive of the whole thing, but if possible, it actually gets worse from there. Juanita Broderick had tweeted, idiots on the left want Elon Musk to apologize to the Pelosi's. For what? It still is questionable and bizarre situation between two men in their underwear. And he replied, nonetheless, I apologize. You don't have to actually reply to a tweet by Juanita Broderick that once again reiterates, I don't know, two men in their tighty whities, kind of curious. And he says, nonetheless, that means he is putting respect on the nonsense she's saying. Yes, he apologized, but he also decided to once again engage with homophobic conspiracy theories about the attack. And then, because of course everything in the end has to be about him, some rando tweets just wondering how many influential people have asked your forgiveness for undeservedly saying and doing bad things to you, for lying about you, your family and companies, for bringing so much harm to you. And he says, that is rather rare. Oh yes, no, you are every bit the victim after all. I mean, when people like tweet out the photo of you partying with Ghislaine Maxwell or post articles about Tesla's igniting and causing pileups and all that, that is the same thing as you implying that an old man whose head had just been bashed in by a right winger with a hammer is involved in some sort of illicit gay affair. That's pretty much the same thing. So maybe I'm the bad guy, Elise. But all these headlines that are like, let's shower praise on Elon Musk, I'm not buying it. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, please, John, have sympathy for the billionaire. Don't you know like the struggles that he has being on the internet? It's so tough for him to have to endure the crash of Tesla stock, and you just feel bad for his misfortunes.
I feel terrible. I feel terrible. Yeah. I feel a little bit bad for the shareholders of Tesla, not so much for him. I feel bad for the employees of Tesla that would like to have a CEO that actually remembered that he worked there. I feel bad for the people whose lives are lost in those crashes and stuff like that. Not so much for the formerly richest man in the world.
Donald will ultimately be held accountable for this Stormy Daniels payment.
Well, that is a bold prediction from Michael Cohen. Of course, Michael Cohen, while he has to some extent tried to move slightly closer to the light once again since leaving the service of Donald Trump, has a history, and you can think of him whatever you want. He believes that this hush money payments investigation, which we're gonna give you the details on, is perhaps one of the greatest threats to Trump going forward. Here is him making the case.
Is the most detrimental to him, his freedom, his livelihood, his business, etc., because it's the easiest to prove. The checks are the checks. We know a lot. There's recordings which have been released in the past. This is an easy one, unlike some of the other cases, like the Fani Willis case in Georgia. Well, he will just come out and lie, which is what he does with impunity, and say, I truly thought that there was 17,861 votes stolen from me, so that attacks the credibility. In this specific case, the first 3-month payment was made by Donald Trump, and I gave those to the House Oversight Committee who posted them and so on. And so he's not in the same position where he can deny or lie the way that he will in some of the other matters.
So again, think whatever you will, and I think there's a lot of thoughts to be had about Michael Cohen, but I think he makes a good case acknowledging the ridiculous status quo of legal accountability that we exist in. So let me just say, Elise, I am sick of this game, and the game is, it's irrelevant if you did the thing. Even if we know that you did the thing, that's irrelevant. We're setting that aside. But like, can you prove the state of mind and like motivation? And did he know? Like, no actual person believes that he thought that he legitimately had those specific number of votes stolen from him. It's BS. Or like, well, what was his motivation for stealing all the classified documents? I know that he was told for 18 months that he had to give them back, and he kept refusing to give them back. But like, what was his state of mind and his emotional state? Like, I think that Michael Cohen is accurate to say that is the battleground that these things are fought on. I just hate that if you did the crime, you should pay the penalty. It seems like that's how it should work.
Yeah, but did you do it? And if we can prove that you did it, let's move on from there. And we can, speculate all we want, and that can be fun. But goodness, crime after crime after crime he has done. I think at this point, we can just assume it's selfishness and just move on to charges.
Yeah, I would love that. And look, I do agree that if what he is saying about the payments and the checks and all that is true, that it is that clear cut, then yes, it is very difficult for him to deny what was going on there. And if he broke the law, again, there should be the consequences. Again, it's just weird that it's like that you have to go for the one where it's clearest, even if it's like by far not the objectively worst thing. Like it's terrible, and the stuff that he's saying, and we'll get to that, is making it even worse. But it's all going to come down to what they can prove. Okay, well, we'll see. The reason that this is something that Michael Cohen would be talking about again is that they appear to be making some moves on this. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office just yesterday began presenting evidence to a grand jury about his role in paying hush money to Stormy Daniels back during the 2016 presidential campaign. They say, the New York Times, that it's laying the groundwork for potential criminal charges. I am just going to say there's no room on the ground anymore for all the groundwork that has been laid. Stop laying groundwork, start making charges would be my request, because we got a lot of document groundwork and Ukraine groundwork and a lot of groundwork. Anyway, on Monday, one of the witnesses was seen with his lawyer entering the building. This is David Pecker, former publisher of the National Enquirer, the tabloid that helped broker the deal with Stormy Daniels back when that was happening. And they've also begun contacting officials involved in Mr. Trump's 2016 campaign. This is they also have signs that they're subpoenaing phone records and other documents that might shed light on the episode. So they're apparently taking it seriously. It's up to each of us individually how seriously we're gonna take it. I don't know how much of my spirit I'm willing to invest in this. Elise, what do you think in comparison to all of what's going on?
Yeah, for the last year, I've been the type to just, I was tired. I was campaigning to get him out of office through most of 2020 and just honestly was burnt out and couldn't hear his name anymore. Like, you see a headline and just be like, okay, you know what? I don't have time for this right now. But now that he's running again, which I could get into how frustrating that is. It's important to know that his base is watching it and know that his base is following along and creating conspiracy theories related to this. So I will follow along and I will hope that, crucial evidence is brought on him. So maybe you can get those reasonable right-wingers that will not vote for him, if they are given the chance. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
I know a lot of people are probably wondering, so what is Trump saying about this? Oh, he is saying things. I do think it's interesting, as I alluded to in the intro. We've got two bleats from Truth Social. In the first, he once again insults her appearance. Again, I've never thought that it's a great defense against accusations of sexual impropriety or sexual assault that you call the woman ugly. He thinks that that's a genius move. I've never understood it. In any event, in this first one that you're seeing there, he says, never had an affair. That's a strong denial that the claims that she's making didn't actually happen. Which is why it's interesting that in this second bleat, he says, with respect to the Stormy nonsense, it is very old and happened a long time ago. Follow-up question, Donald Trump. What happened a very long time ago? Because I was led to believe that you never had an affair. So seems like these are different defenses. One is denying that anything that happened, and the other saying is like, oh, that's such old business. So like the statute of limitations, we're so far beyond it at this point. Beyond for what? Like he's saying it was old, but you're saying it didn't happen. Like, can't you decide which defense you're making against the particular scandal? Maybe he's confused, as so many of us are, about all of these. Maybe he's thinking about the ongoing rape case that's going on. Maybe he's confused about those. I don't know, but he should get his story together because this isn't looking good domestically for him. In any event, why don't we move on to one more topic with what remains of this first hour, and it's a fun one. Oh, actually, before we jump into that, I do want to thank Hrund. I saw a super chat, a very generous super chat. Thank you, Hrund, who'd said, in Russia, they use weapons. In Iran, they take off heads. In Israel, the people get guns. there's a bit of I think a translation thing happening there, but I do appreciate the support for the channel. Thank you for watching. And with that said, now let's launch into this last topic for the hour. President Biden has announced that he's going to end the twin national emergencies for addressing the COVID-19 pandemic on May 11th. So that is going to be really like the final death knell for the federal government taking seriously the pandemic. We've already been making steps towards that. But the interesting little wrinkle is that while Biden announcing that is something that we might agree with, might disagree with, we can have a discussion. At the same time, Republicans are mad at him, not for doing it, but for trying to take credit for it. Marjorie Greene tweeted out, "Too late. Republicans already announced we're declaring COVID is over and passing it through the House this week. The GOP is leading on this issue and Biden is trying to take credit." Well, look, I think a fight over who gets credit for giving up on fighting a pandemic is a weird thing to do. But even inside of the case that you're making, you said we've already done this, we're gonna pass it in the House. Yeah, but you haven't passed it in the House, did you? So how do you get credit for something that you admit you haven't done yet? Anyway, I track the numbers, Elise, every day on the pandemic. I can tell you that in the most recent accounting, we had between 45 and 46,000 cases. That the test positivity rate right now is still at 11%, and over 500 people died in the most recent one-day reporting. So it doesn't feel to me like COVID is over, but I understand that it's complex and that a lot of people have a lot of different opinions about this. So what do you think about this announcement from President Biden?
It just what it reminds me of is this claim of for other issues of, guys, the economy's back. We're creating, thousands of jobs a day, don't you know? And then, you have people sitting at home that are like, I can barely make ends meet. I'm barely paying for rent. And it's the same thing with COVID. It's I'm, afraid to go outside, and I'm immunocompromised. I have kids at home. Whatever it may be, or you just, as a healthy person, still don't, feel safe because you know the risks. And it's the Biden administration. It's GOP lying to our faces when we are faced with the reality of how things are, whether that's for our health or the economy.
Sure, yeah, definitely. Tell to those people who are still worried about it that COVID is over. Tell to the people that are still dealing with long COVID and would love to figure out what sort of help is going to be presented to the millions of people like that. Or just tell it to COVID, Marjorie Greene. Tell COVID that it's over, and we'll see if it agrees. Like, oh, I hadn't realized. She acts as if it's like the Wile E. Coyote running off a cliff and not falling until he looks down and realizes, like, you can't clue the virus into it. Either it's still there or it's not, and it still very much is here. And look, I will grant you that obviously things can't stay the same forever. I modify my behavior based on context. Took a trip to do a live show in San Francisco last weekend. I wore a mask during it, or not literally during the show, but during all of my interactions and as I was going around. But that said, I don't, like, if I'm around one coworker here, I act accordingly. I just think that when you are in charge of the response, you should have a slightly different approach. And also, by the way, like, if Joe Biden says that his view has changed based on context, maybe that means something, because after all, he did take it very seriously for some time. Marjorie Greene is like, no, I'm telling you honestly that it's over right now. Yeah, but you never accepted it. You never agreed that we needed to do anything. So you declaring it over now, what does that even mean? You wanted people to shoot up colloidal silver and deny vaccines. So I don't know, your approach to this isn't particularly important to me. In any event, super last point, at least before we move on.
Oh, not really. You're hitting all the points. Yeah. It's just there's a difference between the people who have denied COVID from day one and have fought against any preventable measures, and somebody who has been advocating for for vaccine distribution and adequate ventilation and you name it. But I just think it's funny from both parties that we're going to deny the reality of everyday Americans.
We'll see what happens. Hopefully it complies and just goes away. With that said, that is it for the first hour of the show. Thank you everyone who's been listening and watching, but there is more to come in the aftermath, so don't go anywhere. Elise and I'll be back after this. Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.